Welcome to your first lecture video of the school year. Today's topic is the Industrial Revolution, and we're going to be talking about three things: major inventions, the Transcontinental Railroad, and Henry Ford. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure that you guys have the basic background of the Industrial Revolution. So what is it? The Industrial Revolution is the shift from manual labor to mechanized work. Again, it's a shift from manual labor to mechanized work. So instead of you doing things by hand, you have a machine that does it for you. Now, there are 5 causes of the Industrial Revolution. Cause number 1 is the Civil War. The Civil War encouraged production and encouraged innovation. You had the expansion of railroads, which we'll be talking about in a moment. So that really allowed the Industrial Revolution to kind of like kickstart itself and just keep on going even after the war. The second thing is natural resources. You had ample natural resources, including oil in America, and that also fueled the growth of the Industrial Revolution. Number 3 is the growing workforce. You had a ton of immigrants that were coming into the country at this time, and these immigrants were willing to work for low wages, and that's very often what these factory jobs paid, and so you had a ton of people that were willing to work in these factories, and so the growing workforce is cause number 3. Cause number 4 is technology. New technology sparks more technology. It sparks almost like a competition. When something gets built, you have people that always want to make it better, make it cheaper, make it faster. And so as this new technology was being invented, you had people that wanted to make that technology better, to make it, like I said, cheaper, faster, quicker. And so it sparks a competition. And then the last one is government policies. Government policies encourage investment in businesses. And these businesses, these inventions, needed investment. So it made it easy to do that by the laws that the government were passing at this time. Now, these 5 causes: Civil War, natural resources, growing workforce, technology, and government policies, is what really allows a shift from manual labor to mechanized work to actually take place in the United States. Now, a couple of the major inventions that we're going to be talking about are right here. You have the refrigeration, the telephone, the typewriter, the airplane, the telegraph. All these things change Americans' life. But there is one man on here, and you only have 3 inventions from him, even though he had a ton more, Mr. Thomas Edison, that really changes Americans' lives. And we're going to talk a lot more about Thomas Edison in class. But this is just a very short list of the things that were coming about during the Industrial Revolution. One of the major things that we really want to talk about, one of the major developments that happened during the Industrial Revolution, has to do with railroads. Now, during this time, before the Industrial Revolution really kicks off, railroads had 2 major issues. The first issue was that the South had short railroad lines that did not form a network. They didn't connect to anything else besides point A to point B, and so it was really difficult to travel in the South on a railroad system. Number 2, were that the railroad tracks were actually different sizes when you're comparing the North to the South. The gauges, the actual tracks, were different sizes, so you couldn't connect them even if you wanted to. So the solution was for the South to adopt the rails of the North. Now, if we look at this picture over here, let's just think. Take a look at the map. What does the map show? All these different squiggly lines represent different railroad tracks. So why would the South adopt the northern rails? If we shift our focus over here, as a result of the South adopting the northern gauges, what happens to the railroad system in the U.S.? Now, you have major effects on the railroad industry. The railroad industry creates thousands of new jobs in lots of different fields, because you need lumberjacks to cut down the wood to actually build these tracks. You need the steel workers who are doing the railroad tracks and the carts and all that stuff. And it also allows a country to get opened up to settlement and growth. You actually have people that are now moving out west. When you move out west, you no longer need to go, in a wagon or on a horse. You could take the train. It's a lot faster. It's probably a lot more comfortable. But the railroad system really does open up the country to the west, and it also creates thousands of new jobs. And in particular, you're thinking a lot about these immigrants that were coming into the country. Now, one of the major things that comes out of the Industrial Revolution is the Transcontinental Railroad. Take a look at this map. You see this squiggly line starts in Nebraska, goes to Utah, starts in California, and goes to Utah. Now, the Transcontinental Railroad, transcontinental meaning it goes across the country, across the continents, was made by two companies. You have the Union Pacific Company and the Central Pacific Company that start building the Transcontinental Railroad. Union Pacific starts in Nebraska and goes to the middle point, which is Utah, and the Central Pacific starts in California and goes to the meeting point in Utah. So they actually had to be really precise if you think about it, because if they messed up as they were getting closer to each other, then the system would be off, the tracks would be off, and they wouldn't be able to connect in Utah. So it was pretty incredible what they managed to do. And the people that actually built this, that managed to get that perfection down for the Transcontinental Railroad, were immigrants. The Central Pacific Company used primarily almost all Chinese immigrants, and the Union Pacific Company hired many Irish immigrants. Now, immigrants were the ones that were working on the railroad system because it was hard labor, it was dangerous, and it was low pay. So a lot of Americans didn't want to do it. Immigrants would take any job they could get, and so here they are working on the Transcontinental Railroad. In this picture, you have workers that are literally sitting in snow. They don't look like they're very well dressed for this weather, but it didn't matter what the weather was. It didn't matter what the conditions were. They were always working through it. Many of them died building the Transcontinental Railroad. Another form of transportation that became increasingly popular during this time, cars. Now, the earliest cars traveled only between 18 and 20 miles per hour. That was considered fast, and only the super duper wealthy Americans could afford them. Now, the Ford Model T, which is the picture you see here, became the most popular car in America because it was cheap and reliable. It wouldn't break down every 2 seconds, and the average American could get it. Henry Ford is responsible for making the Ford Model T. Now, Henry Ford does not invent the car. The modern cars we know it today was actually invented by a German named Carl Benz in 1886. What Henry Ford did was just revolutionary because he invents something called the assembly line. So the assembly line reduces the production costs for cars, and it also reduces the assembly time. It only took 93 minutes to put together a Ford Model T car, and it's basically mindless work. You were given one job to do. So if your job is to put the right front wheel on, that's what you were doing all day, every day. You never changed your job. So it was increasingly mindless. It was very boring to do, and a lot of people just didn't want to do it. I mean, who always wants to do the same thing all day, every day? And so in order to attract workers, Henry Ford doubles the average national salary to $5 a day. $5. That was a lot of money back then. So he did that in order to attract people because the assembly line was just really boring, not fun, but it did manage to get the cost of the car down, and it did manage to have a car built rather quickly. I mean, you're talking in an hour and a half. All these cars are coming into play. The average American is buying these cars, and so American cities are extremely congested. You had terrible traffic jams because you had cars on the roads, you had horses still on the road, you had people that were walking, and you had trolleys, and they were all competing for space. The U.S. government realizes that you need to have traffic regulations, lights, stop signs, speeding laws, that type of thing. And they also realize that they need to actually build more roads. This picture here down at the bottom, that was actually a highway, and you can see it's just basically mud. But that was considered a national federal highway. And so the U.S. government realized the cars were here to stay, they weren't leaving, and we needed to adapt our American cities to it. Now, Henry Ford was also known for hiring black workers. And here is an ad that he would put in a magazine or a newspaper, and if you read that first line, it says, Henry Ford recognized the value of a skilled workforce regardless of race. So it attracted many black workers to the Ford company. However, once they were actually employed, they were often given the worst and most dangerous jobs to do. And obviously that's not here in the ad. It makes it seem like they're so happy that they have, a diverse workforce, but in reality, it was pretty discriminatory. And he also discriminated against Jews. Here are two newspapers that he would publish, and they're both anti-Semitic, which means that they're anti-Jewish. And if you look at that one picture where you have the octopus kind of taking over the world, that octopus represents Jews. See the Star of David on his face? So he was trying to say that Jews were trying to take over the world. And in order to get this message of discrimination across, he actually would publish these newspapers in different languages so that immigrants could also read them. Henry Ford did not believe that women should operate cars either. He thought that they were too labor intensive for women, that it was too difficult for a woman to drive a car, and so they just shouldn't do it. And he also believed that people only cared about cheap and reliable cars. You just wanted a car from get you to point A to point B, and that's it. You didn't really care how it looked, you didn't really care if it was comfortable. It wasn't that serious. But you have to think that wealthy Americans don't want to be driving the same thing that the average American Joe is driving as well. And so his competitor, General Motors, ends up realizing that wealthy Americans want something flashier, and they start building the Chrysler. And so General Motors overtook Ford as the leading U.S. car manufacturer when they started offering these more flashier, more comfortable cars. And then it could also be purchased on credit, meaning you didn't need to have the money, all the money up front. You could pay a little in the beginning and then just kind of pay each month as you go along. Also going on during this time, just want you guys to have this kind of in the back of your mind, are these three things: the Bessemer process, the Brooklyn Bridge, and time zones. So the Bessemer process was developed in the mid-1800s, and basically it makes steel more efficient. It makes steel more cheaply and more easily. Now, the reason that we're talking about steel here is because this Bessemer process allows the Brooklyn Bridge to get created. So the Brooklyn Bridge was the first suspension bridge in the world. It gets completed in 1883. It was actually designed by a German immigrant. Here's his picture. And at the time of its construction, it is the longest bridge in the world. It goes across the East River in New York City. So we talked a lot about transportation. You know, we have cars, the bridges, obviously connecting places. But the railroad system is really what kind of was the main transportation of this time. And when you're talking about getting on a train, you know, you need to have a sort of schedule. And so train schedules is the reason why we have time zones today. In 1884, delegates from 27 countries took the globe and divided it into 24 time zones, one for each hour of the day. Now, before these men did this, each town had their own clocks set independently. So if it was 1 o'clock in Newark, it could easily be maybe 1:30 or 2 o'clock in Philly. Each town was doing their own thing. So when you're trying to set a train schedule, it was kind of difficult if every single town is doing their own thing. So they created this time zone, 24 zones, one for each hour of the day, to kind of make everything universal so that everybody was on the right page, everybody was on the same page, and they could set up a train schedule that it would run efficiently and effectively. So we have come to the end of our video, guys. Are you able to answer these questions? You do not need to write these questions down or answer these questions. You don't have to do that. But just review these questions. Make sure you can answer these questions based on your notes. Because if you can't, go back into the video, rewatch it, and then get the notes that you are missing. Take a look at these questions. Make sure you have the notes for these questions. And I will see you guys tomorrow in class.